Oh, good morning, everyone, and welcome to today's webinar on intelligent automation, which will be facilitated by Emily Feneran and Kevin Young in Deloitte and Conor Moody of the Workplace Relations Commission. Thank you to the very significant number of people who have registered to attend, and I can see the numbers are jumping up. And just to say that this event will be recorded. So my name is Leanna Colgan and I'm a member of the Public Service Transformation Team in the Department of Public Expenditure, National Development Plan, Delivery and Reform. So as many of you may know, in 2019, the Department and the Office of Government Procurement established an RPA framework to enable all departments and public bodies to easily access and use automation tools to optimize business processes and create efficiencies. Deloitte have worked on this framework since 2019 and were successful in tendering again in 2023 to deliver robotic process automation services across the public and civil service. The framework is direct drawdown, which makes it easier and quicker for public bodies to avail of and access automation services, as there's no need for public bodies to directly procure these services themselves. The framework includes intelligent automation services, which some of you may have heard on the webinar that ran earlier this year. We're delighted to hear from the Deloitte team today and from Conor Moody of the Workplace Relations Commission, who will bring us through the impact that intelligent automation has had on their services. Deloitte are currently running an RPA immersion course and business analyst beginner course, so please do consider emailing the team to express your interest, and the next intake will be in September. I'll now hand over to Emily from Deloitte. We hope that this will be an interactive session, so please post your questions in the Q&A box throughout. Thank you.
Morning, folks, and thanks, Leanna. My name is Emily Feneran, and as Leanna has sort of said, I work with Deloitte along with my colleague Kevin Young. I'm a director here in Deloitte, and I work with a number of different public bodies, I suppose, rolling out intelligent automation or robotic process automation. So as has been covered previously, it's just that Deloitte is that sort of delivery agent on the framework. We've been working with Deeper since 2018, and now we're just launching into the second framework, and that will possibly go on to 2027. We've been working with a number of government bodies, as I've sort of said. They're named there on the slide. So it's DSP, Department of Transport, Department of Education, HSE, Public Jobs, NTA, Revenue, are just to name but a few. And Conor here is then going to just talk to you about his experience of automation and rolling those projects out within WRC. So to date, I suppose the framework has actually delivered by building a number of different bots across those different organizations to process 8.6 million transactions to date. That has actually then released a burden of admin work just to the value of 880,000 hours. And what we're seeing actually from the clients at the moment is that for every euro spent, they actually are getting €3 of value back on that spend. So that's over 300% a return on investment. As Leanna has mentioned, we also run awareness sessions, so like today and then earlier in the year, just to sort of bring you up to speed on what actually is happening within the framework, give you a bit of a highlight of whether if there's any new technology that's come to the fore, bit of education in that sort of space. And then also, I suppose, as we're doing today, which is getting some of the people actually to speak about their experiences. And last but no means least, yes, we do run training courses, and yes, we've just completed a BA, I suppose, immersion, but also we do run developer courses as well. So please do get in touch. To date, it's been over 600 training hours that we have actually rolled out, and to 15 different organizations, but that's growing all the time. We plan to run the next sort of training sessions probably in about September, October time. So do let us know if you want to actually be considered for any of those. So just, I suppose, to give you a brief sort of overview of what exactly intelligent automation is. So that is just, I suppose, mainly what we've been looking at is there's different technologies which sort of then help in that sort of area to automate your processes. One being robotic process automation. And that, I suppose, really is software that mimics the actions of a person. So it's basically, it's not intelligent, it follows rules. So it's just that sort of structured process, repetitive, and therefore you can sort of get that mimicked by a bot, as I generally like to call them, and just sort of carry out those actions for you. What we're seeing then is really, I suppose, in this space is that it is low code solutions. So we've got the providers, UiPath, NICE and Blue Prism on the framework, and they are building sort of these low code solutions, which basically that means that there's already connectors there, there's drag and drop pieces, so you can just pull those together. So you don't necessarily have to build them from scratch. So that's what makes this a bit easier to sort of roll out. Other pieces then that we're sort of seeing is that intelligent OCR. So we're all sort of aware of the scanning and sort of reading of documents. So this is sort of building on that. So you've got it where it'll do its optical character recognition, read those sort of documents, convert that into a digital format. So it's putting that machine learning algorithm on it so that it can interpret sort of forms, styles, and even handwriting in that sort of space as well. Then layering on top of that, then, if you want to sort of look at it, actually, how can it interpret some of that data if it's coming in written? This is where you sort of get then your natural language processing. So it's understanding that data either being in written or spoken sort of manner and being able to, I suppose, gather the meaning from that and the syntax and being able to reply. So this is where we're seeing chatbots getting a bit better in that sort of space of having that natural language processing. Another piece then, which is slightly different from all of that, which is, I suppose, process mining. And I know we covered this in one of our earlier sort of awareness sessions, but just to kind of give you a brief overview of that. That's basically sort of a tool that is available on the framework, which can be used to discover and analyze and monitor your processes. So basically what you kind of do is you pick different items, or be it a date, be it a purchase order number, etc., and follow that through your systems to understand actually where are the blockages of that within the system. What can I actually do to alleviate that? Is it something that automation can fix? Is it a manual fix that needs to be applied to, I suppose, unlock that blockage? And then you can sort of run that process mining tool again. So basically, it's just sort of that monitoring tool of understanding actually where there's difficulties in getting processes completed in a more efficient manner. And I suppose that's just a very quick run through of intelligent automation and some of the tooling that's available on the framework at the moment. But I suppose to go into a bit more depth, I'm actually just going to hand over to Connor now to walk you through his experience to date.
Thanks very much, Emily. So yeah, today I'm going to be going through intelligent automation, but also what we've done in that space in the WRC. So just to give you an overview of what I'm going to cover today, I'll give you a brief background to what robotic process automation is, a brief background of artificial intelligence, and then the differences between those two, because those differences can have a big impact on how they can potentially benefit your organization. One will suit some organizations and the other will suit others depending on your need, and I'll try and identify where that need can be, how you can identify it. I'll cover the OGB framework, of which Deloitte are the supplier, and how that's benefited WRC. And then I'll go into the case study of what we've done, how we've implemented RPA, what the bot, as Emily calls it, and as we call it as well, has done for us. The results of running the robot now for about a year and a half, and the next steps we're taking in the process. So to just give you a background to robotic process automation, as Emily sort of touched upon, it is a software robot that can learn, mimic, execute rules-based business processing. It's done by analyzing the processes behind tasks. So if you have specific tasks, the idea is that you would document all of the processes that go into that task, and documenting them culminates in a process design document. this PDD is essentially your building blocks for creating the robot and for getting it to work on everything you need to do. The more accurate, the more detailed your PDD is, the better your robot will perform, and the greater the success it will have in handling the tasks that you set it. The creation of the PDD is a hugely important task. I'll go through the steps involved in building the RPA later on, but just to highlight that the PDD and the documenting of those tasks is so important in terms of carrying out the work. So this PDD, as I said, it'll be used to document those tasks. But for the WRC, having an RPA system in general, it has freed up valuable resources in our customer service team by essentially replicating the work done on the more simple repetitive tasks, freeing them up to provide sort of better public service to our customers. And just to kind of highlight, and this is, I'll go into the difference between RPA and AI in a few minutes, but the RPA is essentially a digital employee. So as with any employee, you can access multiple systems. It isn't just tied to one particular system. You wouldn't just run an RPA, say in Excel. Now, if all you need to do is use Excel for your RPA, then that's no problem. But the robot can jump off to different systems and return back to the system it was on. You know, it has that sort of ability to act like an employee in terms of accessing different systems. So the best way to kind of view it is as a digital employee. So AI, or sort of how that differs, AI has that level of intelligence behind it. So it can simulate human reasoning, learning, problem solving. It's essentially built on what's called neural networks. So it's simulating, you know, brain activity, thought, developing decisions based on learnings from the data that's provided with. It can be used in a variety of applications, as Emily touched upon. There was natural language processing, predictive analytics, and image recognition. And I suppose an example of that, one of the great uses of AI at the moment is in image recognition for diagnosing medical conditions, especially the fact that it can do it very quickly based on an image that it may take longer for radiographers to diagnose that, but based on the information that it's provided with and the strength of that information, it can provide very accurate medical diagnosis. So it is built on large sets of data, and I'll touch upon the difference between RPA and AI in a minute in terms of you know, what fuels them, but it is built on large sets of data, and you do need, depending on your need and what you're going to implement, you do need a lot of data to train a very accurate AI system, and it makes decisions based on learnings from that data. And there are very sort of advanced algorithms behind AI. It can be quite intensive from a GPU perspective in terms of computing, because there's a lot of activity going on, but there are very advanced algorithms that allow AI to be very powerful. And because of that learning and that ability to learn from the data, AI can improve its performance over time without the need for manual intervention. So I suppose this slide kind of shows you the difference between RPA and AI in the sense of you know, they would both be classified as intelligent automation to a certain extent, but AI is a very process-driven system. So you need, if you have simple repetitive tasks that have exact processes in terms of how they operate, and if you're working off structured data, so fields in a database, entries on a form, cells in a spreadsheet, RPA is going to work very well for you because there's a defined structure to how it's working. The trade-off of that is that it will require clear processes. As I said, in the creation of that PDD, the process design document, you need to have very clear processes in terms of what you're doing. without those clear processes, the robot will not be able to complete as many tasks as you would like it to do. So that kind of ability to have a lot of processes to define what it's doing is very, very important. The flip side of that, from an AI perspective, is that AI is not process driven, it's data driven. So the way an AI system works is that you take a large chunk of data, depending on what you have, and you use that data to train the AI system. You then set, you start using the AI system on other sets of data which are, relative, have a relationship with the data that it's been trained on. So, an AI system will only be able to work on something that it knows about. It needs a knowledge base behind it in order to work. So training an AI system on certain types of data and then expecting it to work accurately on sets of data that have no real relationship to the data it's trained on is not going to work. It's extremely data driven in that sense. So it's unstructured data. It works, I suppose, more on that kind of qualitative data, where it's RPA would be much more on the quantitative data side of things. And because of that, it requires clean data. If you're building any AI system, having clean data is hugely important, and attributing correct weights to that data. So, if you train anything or anybody on information that is not necessarily as accurate as it could be, your output is going to reflect that. So, depending on your need and what you want to do, if you feel that you don't have any set structure to what you're attempting to achieve, AI would be much more useful as long as you have a large data set to work with. But if there's clear defined processes and very structured data, RPA will work better for you. I'll just go through the pros and cons of RPA just so that you kind of know it. RPA will carry out processing exactly as it's been programmed to do. So this goes back to the creation of the PDD and clear defined processes to what you're doing. It will carry out everything exactly as you tell it, which will be very, very useful. I suppose from a governance standpoint as well, in terms of making sure that everything is correctly completed. That will sort of a big impact in terms of public service bodies, but it can potentially, depending on the tasks that you have and the repetitive nature and the ability for it to handle a large amount of data, it can potentially save huge amounts of staff time because of this. It will also eliminate human error. It will repeat the exact same process over and over again, exactly as it's been programmed to do. And a lot of the time with simple repetitive tasks, there is a greater risk of human error. So the fact that RPA can eliminate them is hugely helpful. It can also be scaled up once, I'll talk about this towards the end of the presentation, but once you've automated one part of what you're doing, you start to look beyond that and see how the savings can compound. So RPA is very useful for that. It can also operate as a normal employee. So it systematically works through those processes without stopping. But it does so much quicker. To give you an example, our robot, and I'll talk about the WRC solution in a minute, but our robot handles between 25 and 30 of our complaint applications every day, and it carries them out in a space of about 2 hours, and it would take a normal employee a considerably longer amount of time to do that work. So from the sort of negative standpoint, any error in those processes will continue until manual intervention. It doesn't have that intelligence behind it to learn from its mistakes. If it makes a mistake on a certain type of application today, it will make the same mistake tomorrow, and so on until that mistake is manually fixed. And then also any changes to the systems that it uses, such as user interfaces or any sort of programs or anything like that, they will need programming changes to reflect that for the robot. So if you do an upgrade of any system that the robot uses, the robot works from the point of view of it accesses a screen and it does a piece of work, and then it potentially accesses another screen, and it requires everything to be in the exact location on that screen to do that work, because it is, as I said, acting as a digital employee. So it's clicking between different screens. So if things change and updates happen and stuff has moved from different into different areas, that needs to be reflected in the programming, or the robot will just run into more errors. Also, as any employee, the RPA is susceptible to kind of system slowdowns, downtime, server outages. We say, I'm not sure if I mentioned that we run a robot from about 6 o'clock in the evening. This is kind of the most optimal time for us as an organization to run that, in terms of not a huge amount of activity on the system, but also what happens during the night is that backups, as we all know, would happen, will be taken. That will slow down the system. If the robot is attempting to access a screen and for whatever reason that screen fails to load due to the system being slow because backups are being done, or because there's an outage or something, it will run into the same errors as a human employee will run into. So things like that just need to be factored in. So in terms of AI, and this is the same for RPA, it's available 24/7. It's not constrained to human factors, in terms of working hours and things like that. So it can be incredibly useful in terms of the amount of hours that it can be put to use. AI is also, it's an unbiased decision-making system, so it will remove that kind of cognitive bias that can have an impact in terms of the quality of the work that's done. It can carry out predictive analytics very quickly. This can be very, very useful for making important decisions quickly that organizations need. Again, this depends on the data source, and it depends on the amount of information that it's been provided with. And AI can, I know everybody will have seen about ChatGPT and things. AI can create far more efficient chatbots than normal decision tree models, which are based on question and answers. Would you like this? If yes, go here. If no, go here. Chatbot can potentially eliminate 10 or 15 steps in the process of a chatbot with the answer of just one question. So it is a lot more efficient because it has that intelligence behind it. It has learned, provided it's learned the source material of everything that goes into what somebody might be requesting in terms of the chat facility, it can make far more efficient and accurate decisions. On the sort of flip side of that, AI, as I said, needs large data sets to optimize the accuracy of the model. You can build a model, you can build an AI model quite quickly, but if your accuracy is low, it's nearly more dangerous to run that than to not run anything. I suppose an example of this would be the Netflix recommendation system. Netflix can make a recommendation based on 10 programs you've seen. It can recommend something that you might want to view again, or might want to view as an alternative, but it's not going to be hugely accurate based on 10. But if it has 1,000 things that you've seen, it's going to be far more accurate in terms of knowing, what you need. AI can be very expensive as an upfront cost, so you kind of need to weigh up the long-term savings depending on your implementation, and factor that out in terms of initial upfront costs. AI can also disregard ethics. As I said, it's it's the flip side of being an unbiased system is that if there is bias built into the system from the outset, it will perpetuate that bias. So that just needs to be factored in as well. So WRC chose RPA over AI. The reason we did this is because there was a defined structure to what we were doing. We had an outline of processes that were required to carry out the handling of the complaint applications. And so when somebody makes a complaint to the Workplace Relations Commission, it goes in to our system into the complaints process and is handled accordingly. So there's an initial handling of that complaint, and that's what the robot will work through, and I'll go through that in a minute. But because we could clearly define that process, RPA was a much greater solution for us. It was much more cost effective as a result. And as I've touched on before, it does act as a system user. So not only can it use the customer relationship management system that we have for handling our complaint applications, but it can also jump off to Excel, which I'll go through in a minute as well, and other systems that it needs in order to perform its work. And this is, this obviously leads to huge potential for future expansion. So WRC chose RPA, and they engaged with the OGP framework on this. Deloitte, as I said, are the supplier of that framework. And it's, I mean, from my own experience, it's been a very, very good it's been a good experience and a very good thing for us to have. We found the whole thing very easy. Just an idea from the framework of what the supplier will deliver. They'll supply the renewal and installation of RPA licenses. With any RPA system, you need a robotic license, and as Emily touched on, there's 3 that Deloitte supply. We use the UiPath software, and there's a license that goes with that, and so there's a cost incurred. There is also NICE and Blue Prism, as Emily touched on as well. Supplier will also provide RPA training and development, as Emily said, and then technical support and any other sort of consultancy services that are required. So I'll just get on to what WRC did in terms of our implementation of the RPA. And the overall objective, to give you kind of a background of WRC, is that we deliver world-class workplace relations service and employment rights framework for employers and employees. We currently process over about 10,000 complaints every year into the organization. And at present, in the ICS team, which is the Information and Customer Service team, there is 20 staff members. Many of these staff members are handling the initial processing of those complaint applications. So in order for us to evolve as an organization and to provide better services, there was a strong need for us to free up the time of those staff members for other tasks. And there was also concern about the ability for WRC to handle any potential workload increases. As I said, we process over 10,000 complaint applications every year. If that number increases, we have to respond from a resourcing perspective in order to not delay processing times of WRC complaints, and to ensure that people's complaints are heard in a timely manner. So RPA helps hugely with that. The percentages that I'll show you at the end are exactly that. They're percentages of those 10,000 complaints, but if that was 20,000 complaints, the percentages would be the same. So the number of complaints that the RPA system is handling would increase. It can deal with that volatility. And as I said, we engage with Deloitte from the OGP framework in order to process the complaints. And as I've said as well, we use the UiPath RPA software. So this was the project steps for how we carried out our RPA solution. So there was initial meetings with Deloitte on those specifications. There was workshops in the ICS team office down in Carlow with Deloitte, and these workshops were hugely important because they allowed for Deloitte to get a sense of the processes that were involved, but also the kind of solution that would be needed. This created the solution design document. Once everybody was comfortable with that, the creation of the process design document was carried out, and this allowed for a step-by-step guide of every single thing that the robot would need to do in terms of performing its actions. The PDD will go through various different iterations before you finalize the PDD, because it needs input from everybody that it has a stake in it in terms of the processes that go on, because having, as I said before, clear processes will allow for a far more accurate system. Once the development started, Deloitte developed the system based on that PDD, and it was tested We went live with the system in January 2023, and we're constantly reviewing the work that's being done by the robot, how efficient it has been done, it is having in terms of its work, and we're troubleshooting those efficiencies and seeing where we can make changes. So you'll see when I run through the results, you'll see we made changes halfway through the year after analysing the work that had been carried out to that point, and we were able to increase the efficiency of the robot in terms of the amount that it can handle. From a timeline perspective for us, and it will vary depending on the scale of the project, but it was a 14-week development cycle. It was carried out from September 2022 till December 2022, and as I said, we went live then in January of 23. So to give you a kind of a small background in terms of the processes from our perspective of what the WRC handles, what the WRC robot will handle, this is kind of an outline of those type of processes. Now, this is high level. The actual process design document will be far more granular than what is listed here, but this is to give you an idea of the type of work that's being done. I'm not going to go through every one of them, but I will point out that where the robot runs into any form of ambiguity, it will flag that complaint application for manual intervention. So an example of that is the second sort of item there. You can see where the robot is verifying whether it's a duplicate or a parallel complaint, which sometimes happens where somebody will submit a complaint again, where the employment dates are the same, the complaint type is the same, complaint area is the same, the circumstances are the same. A normal human employee may remove that complaint from the system, but the robot won't take that chance, and it will create a note on the system, and I'll talk through that in a minute in terms of what it needs to do, what a human employee may need to do with that application, but the fact that the robot is not finishing that application because of that level of ambiguity. Another one there, sort of item 8 around matching the complainants. So if a record already exists on the system for either a kind of complainant, respondent or representative, the robot will assign the IDs for those individuals to the record. And if they don't, as you can see on the next step, it will create new entries for those individuals. And I touched upon earlier about the robot being able to use different systems. So at the end of the cycle, the robot will go into Microsoft Excel and create a report for us about its activity during the day. This is hugely important as it allows us to see the exact numbers from an Excel standpoint of what the robot has done that day, but from an sort of greater overview and in terms of sort of controlling the robot, we have, because we've used UiPath as our software provider, we have used the UiPath orchestrator. So essentially when using UiPath in particular, there is two elements. There's the robot itself and there's the orchestrator. And the orchestrator essentially acts as the manager to the robot. This dashboard you can see here allows us to control what the robot is doing, when the robot is operating, get a sense of its activity. I don't know if you can see, if you can squint at the top there, there's various options at the top, but one of them is queues. So we can see the queue, how big the queue is for the robot to be working on any given day, and we can troubleshoot accordingly. So we can automate the robot to run at certain times of the day, which, as I said, is very useful. But we can also trigger the robot to run at any given time, depending on when we need it. One thing to point out about this, that the robot can potentially operate as an on-cloud solution or an on-premise solution. In our instance, the WRC robot is an on-premise solution. The orchestrator will always operate as an on-cloud solution. The reason I mention this is you would need to be conscious of any potential GDPR issues around that. Now, the UiPath orchestrator it only needs one field. It needs a unique identifier for every separate task. And for us, this is the WRC complaint application number, which is an internal non-personal ID number. So there isn't any GDPR implications from our point of view, but it's just something you need to be conscious of. The orchestrator literally just needs that one number. Nothing else gets sent to it. But also from a UiPath orchestrator point of view, not everybody will want this level of granularity around the control of the robot. So you may not want to operate the UiPath orchestrator. You may just want to run your robot and have other people monitor it and have other people automate it, depending on your need and your resource for running that. And the framework supplier can obviously provide support for this as well. Just a few notes then on the UiPath orchestrator. So as I said, it's used for troubleshooting issues with the software. And it does, as you can see on the graph on the previous page here, that it does provide us down the bottom there with kind of real-time visuals of the numbers that the robot is processing. That information at the bottom of that screen can be changed to show the week or the day or even the hour, depending on your need. And as I said, the robot sort of works in two stages, with that queue element being the first stage. So the robot will build a queue based on the number of complaint applications that have been received into our CRM or customer relationship management system. And then once the queue is built, it will then begin processing those applications. And that's what the orchestrator allows for us, is that control of those automations. And it also allows for that report on the progress of the robot, which is extremely useful for us. So following on from that, the results that you can see on this slide for the whole of 2023 shows how well the robot has performed given the very ambiguous nature of our complaint application process. I can tell you that 35% of fully processed applications is a very high number, or it's a high percentage. You can see from the first half of the year, it was running at about 30%. And then when we analysed that performance and just looked at some of the issues that the robot runs into in terms of not being able to fully process a complaint application, we were able to make programming changes and increase that percentage to 35%. Now it's it's a case of diminishing returns in terms of the amount of programming that would be needed to increase that higher. There wouldn't be a great return on investment for us because of the large amounts of processing and needed in terms of getting that percentage up. So they're very good figures, and we're very happy with the progress. But something that's quite important to point out here is that when I say fully processed, that robot has handled them from start to finish in its entirety. Where it needs manual intervention, and that 65% that it needs a human to interact with, the robot has done that complaint application to a certain point. So it's gotten X amount of distance down the line in terms of processing it. So it's not that the employee that's coming in to intervene in that application is coming in cold. They will have a lot of that work already done by the robot. So it's not necessarily that 65% in their entirety will need to be handled. Also, the robot is very useful. It will create a note on the system to say why it couldn't complete it. Now, there are a number of different sort of reasons why the robot may not need to do it, depending on the information that's been inputted by the complainant on the application form. So it's very useful that a note is put on the system and that the employee can then jump in and complete that application to the finish. So really, by saying it's fully processed 35%, in terms of its success for us, it's certainly a lot higher than that. And that's kind of reflected in the staff savings. So it's estimated that the robot for us, and every situation will differ, that it currently handles the work of 3 to 4 staff members. And as I said, that is hugely important for us, and it allows those staff to be deployed to other areas to better serve that public need. And I talked before about kind of the robot's ability to expand, once complete. So we've begun already phase 2 of our RPA project, and for us, this will be expanding on the processes that are currently being performed by the RPA software. So it's the next chain, next line in the chain, in terms of what we need to handle for complaint applications. And this is work that's done but currently by our post-registration unit that handles complaint letters to those complainants. So the robot will next look to tackle that, and it's an iterative progress, and we'll keep implementing our RPA solution to evolve the organization and to allow, as I said, for that better, for us to better serve that public need. So that's it from me anyway. Thanks very much for listening, and I will pass you back over to Kevin.
Thanks, folks. I've been trying to answer questions as we go along, but a couple outstanding specifically in relation to WRC. I think one of the questions is around why did you choose UiPath and why hybrid cloud? That's to you, Connor, I guess.
I think we've lost Connor, Kevin. Hopefully he'll be back into us in a minute.
Okay. This one is for Derek. Is there a reason why Microsoft Power Automate is not included as one of the RPA tools in the framework?
Yeah, can you hear me?
Yeah.
Yeah, so the tender was open to all suppliers of RPA software, and we had to measure everybody on a like-for-like basis. The software had to be capable of being, it had to be deployed completely on-premise without any internet connection back to a cloud solution, and it had to be able to be deployed in the cloud completely. Without any on-premise connectivity if needed. So, and the costings had to be on a like-for-like basis. So it was eligible. There were tenders who proposed different solutions. Power Automate, while it's part of the Microsoft suite, is not the only one that's out there. There's at least 10 RPA providers out there. And when we measured it on a like-for-like basis across all the qualitative criteria and the cost, and that was a key thing. We had set the costs up in a particular way. These 3 vendors were the most economically advantageous to be offered to public service bodies. So that's the reason. In a year, 2.5 years time, we'll be getting ready to go out again because the demand on the framework is so high and it's ramping up. And I've no doubt there'll be other vendors in the marketplace by then as well. So I hope that answers the question. Yeah.
Yep. And I suppose, look, we're due to wrap up at 11:45. So last question to you, Connor, in terms of, there's a couple of questions around how did you choose the product you did, UiPath, and why did you choose a particular solution which was hybrid?
Sure, and apologies, I lost my connection just at the right time. I wasn't purposely trying to avoid that question. So why we chose UiPath? UiPath is, I suppose it's the biggest provider that's out there. There's NICE and Blue Prism as well, but there was obviously apprehension in here about initially going down this route, so it was kind of safer to go with a supplier that was as renowned as UiPath was, and there was a lot of positive feedback on the software. In terms of why we chose a hybrid solution, we had to choose a hybrid solution. The robot was going to be operating using our CRM solution. So as I said in the talk, the orchestrator operates from the cloud, it can't operate as an on-premise solution because it's a software as a service. So it needs to operate from the cloud. Our CRM solution is an on-premise solution. We're not in the cloud with our CRM. So with the robot needing to use an on-premise solution, and with the orchestrator being an on cloud solution, we had to use hybrid. There was no alternative for us in that regard.
Grand, thanks, Conor. I think we seem to be having network issues across the board. We've now lost Kevin. I suppose I can see some other questions just coming in. One of them in particular, I suppose, just if we go back to the initial sort of meetings in around PDD and solution design, Conor, how long or how often did you have to sort of have meetings to be able to get that documentation and the understanding of that process?
Sure. So there was about 3 separate workshops that took place down in our ICS team in Carlow. This was kind of important because we kind of created, to give you an example, there was about 15, I talked about different iterations, there was about 15 different iterations of the PDD created. So having separate workshops allowed for time to analyze the current PDD, discuss with staff who may not have been able to attend certain workshops, and ensure that everybody had their feedback noted in the process design, because as we all know, people will bring different things to the table in terms of how stuff can be processed more efficiently. So having multiple workshops was very important, and as I said, many different versions of the PDD before it was signed off by all parties, that it was a complete reflection of the type of processes that go on in terms of that complaint handling.
Yeah, and I suppose what I've sort of seen in my experience is if you get the PDD right, then everything after that flows. Yeah. And it's all in and around the exception handling too. So, because I see there's some questions coming in with what happens if the bot does something differently or goes in sort of way, but it's actually kind of thinking about, I always sort of think about this as like going to make a cup of tea. You'll make it different to how I'll make it, whether I want the tea bag in, out, blah, 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 milk, whatever. It's all sort of aligning on that sort of way, but actually understanding, well, what happens if I don't have a tea bag or I don't have a milk? How do I handle in that sort of way? And that's making it very simplistic, folks, but it's just sort of walking that through. That's the important part of actually going through the PDD and understanding what are those exceptions and then where to hand it back off to that manual intervention piece that Conor sort of spoke about. So that is walking that through. Walking that through is very, very important. So that's why sometimes it can take those number of different sort of sessions.
Yeah, and sorry, just to add to that, Emily, somebody also said, what if the robot does this, or what if it goes off and do this?
Yeah.
As I said, this is a process-driven system. The robot will only do the processes that it's been programmed to do. There isn't that level of intelligence there that you would have in AI, where it's learning based on the output of one instance will feed the input of another. It doesn't have that. If it makes a mistake today on a certain way of processing things, it will make the same mistake again tomorrow and the next day. So there isn't that level of intelligence there. The way it can sort of be described as brain versus brawn, the AI being the brain and RPA being the brawn of the system, the RPA will handle that grunt work, but it will do it repetitively and based on exactly what it's told to do. There isn't that level of intelligence behind it.
Yeah. And that's it. And I suppose it's that whole, it's at the end of the day, it's a software system. It needs to have that sort of change and that incident management piece around it. Like if something changes, how do I want to change the process? I need to be able to change that sort of coding that's in there. And I suppose there's one other question just in and around systems itself. So if there's been changes to a system, and how does it access the system? So I might just cover that one briefly. So generally, it depends on some of the systems. What I've seen is it's just basically you set the bot up as a user, basically the same as you would within any sort of organization. It's kind of given an identity and an access. It accesses the application. It can go in front end or back end, depending on what is the most efficient way to do. And that's part of this kind of solution design. If there's changes made to that system that it's accessing and that's going to impact the process, then a change will have to be made to the process, to the automation. But if there isn't, then it's fine. It can go in and sort of go as normal. So it's just understanding if changes or patches, etc., to systems are going to impact what the bot is doing, or it's done anything in that sort of space, then that's what needs to be done. So it's generally, I suppose, making sure that you actually have access to test environments for those systems that you're using, so that then when you know that there's a change coming on those systems, it's running the bot over that, seeing if that it works, and then going again. It's that sort of basic sort of piece. So hopefully that has answered that question. I think we've probably come to the end of time today. I don't want to hold too many people back. So Conor, I just want to say thank you so much for going through all of that. You went through it in great detail and gave us a good understanding of the process. I suppose the one piece I would just like to ask is, are there any lessons learned that you would sort of call out, or any pieces possibly that...
I suppose it's that thing around assessing the need for your organization. There's been other people that have sort of talked to us about wanting to implement RPA, but then on greater analysis, it's found that they don't actually have clear processes for what they're looking to do. You know, RPA, as I said, works on structured data. You need to assess what you would like the RPA system to do. It could be possible that AI is a better fit for you, but that's why I kind of hoped to highlight in this talk was the differences between those, and it's that kind of assessment of what you need to do that will fuel the decision in terms of what you make around intelligent automation. So learnings for us, you know, we eventually arrived at RPA as the best solution, but knowing what they are before we go down that route, and knowing exactly what we want to automate, assessing, this is where, you know, Deloitte were very useful in the sense of assessing that return on investment, how much time actually goes into the work that we're looking to schedule an RPA system to do. Is it beneficial for us to spend X amount of money? What are the potential savings of that? Things like that need to be kind of assessed before you sort of go down the road any further, I suppose.
Perfect. Thanks a million for that.
Thanks, Emily. Thanks, Conor, and thanks, Derek, as well for joining us, and Subhadra. So just Emily and Kevin's contact details are up there. Thank you to all the audience for joining and your interaction and engagement throughout. And we do have the questions. This session was being recorded, so we will send out that link. And Emily, I think there's already people looking for similar webinars and subjects later in the year. So no doubt Perfect. We might be back in touch, and great to see how much interest it's generating. And for any questions we didn't get to, we will follow up and just say thank you. This was our Summer Innovation Network event, and we will be planning further events later in the year, and we'll be back in touch. So thank you so much, everyone.